Alright, so we left off with the transmission, the single-speed transmission that we built in part 1 of the Traxxas TRX-4 Sport Kit. The transmission is nice and smooth. We're going to get it out of the way now because we are going to be working on the spools and the rear axle. If you're not familiar with what a spool is, it's basically a locked differential. Your differential usually allows you to rotate the tires on one axle back and forth. One will spin forwards, the other one will spin in reverse. But what a spool does is it basically acts as a fully locked differential all the time. So having a locked differential is very important. The only difference with this compared to a different Traxxas TRX-4 is that in another TRX-4 you might be able to unlock those differentials for a better steering radius. We're not going to worry about that though because we do have locked differentials. We're also going to put together the rear axle today. We've got a red diff cover, which is different than the other kit, which I am interested to see how that's going to look. I'm very excited about that. And we build our portals. So let's just stop talking about it and get into it. So in the last video where we built the transmission, everything of course went together nice and smoothly. But I have to say, I have built a transmission of a TRX-4 before. What I have not done is built a spool. So I'm excited to see how this is going to go together. I think it's going to be fairly straightforward. It should be actually easier than building a full differential from the other kit because really there's a lot less going on with a spool than there is a regular differential. One thing that I noticed with the screws that are in this bag for the spools is they actually have Loctite that have been applied to them. If the camera will focus. There we go. You can see that there's a little bit of blue Loctite that's been put on the screws. Everything here looks really nice. All of this is metal, which is great to see, so it should last a very long time. So over here in the instructions, you'll see that Traxxas tells you to tighten the screws in a cross pattern. The reason for this is to make sure that the ring gear sits properly and evenly. You would want to do the same thing if you were putting on beadlock wheels. You would want to do the same thing if you were putting a tire on a real 1-to-1 scale car. So you want to make sure that you do this so that way everything goes on evenly. You're going to start with one screw, then go directly across, and then to another one, and then directly across from that. That makes sure that everything goes on properly. So I noticed that in the instructions it doesn't actually tell you to build 2 of these, even though you do need 2 of them. So I went a little bit further into the manual, and it actually says that you're going to build the second spool later on when you come to the front axle assembly. Now, I don't want to lose any of these little screws or anything, so I'm going to build the second spool right now. As far as I can tell, there's not actually any difference between the two. So I don't know why they did that. I don't know why they just didn't say to double this step. I hope that I'm not going to mess anything up by doing both, but I really don't see any differences between either of the spools. Every part appears to be just duplicated. So now we've got 2 completely metal spools that have been built. Now that they're built, I can tell there's really no difference at all. They are identical, entirely identical. Everything is exactly the same. So having them both built shouldn't be an issue, even though the second one doesn't get built until a little bit later on in the assembly manual. But now it's time to bring in the rear axle. What we've got in here is going to be the main axle housing, your axle shafts, the portal axle components. I really like this. This is really a nice touch. The other truck that I built did not have this. It was in gray on the other truck, and I know that this is just a small little detail, but I actually really like it in red. It looks really good. It's going to be a nice accent color. We've got our portal gears, our stub axles, a bunch of screws. I'm also going to point out once again that Traxxas has included another plug to go into the axle housing, because if you remember in the other kit where we have a locking differential cable, well, this truck doesn't have that. So we need to have another plug here that's going to plug up the hole, because there would definitely be a risk of water getting into this differential housing. Just like what Traxxas did with the transmission, since we don't have a shifting fork in the transmission, they put a rubber plug to make sure that nothing gets in there. They did exactly the same thing with the axle housing. I used a little mini pair of needle nose pliers that was very easy just to rest on top and then clamp down the E-clip. So now that we've got this step done, we're going to move over here and we're going to work on getting the portal axle mounts, which I believe are right here. Check it out. I've got the portal axle mounts installed on both sides. You do want to make sure that you have the correct side. It says here to note the orientation. There's a little letter R and a letter L for right and left. So make sure that you're holding the axle in the right orientation and then install the portal axle mounts accordingly. Now we're going to start working on the portal axles themselves. With both of my portal axles built, now we're going to get ready to install them. However, we need to put in the axle drive shafts as well. So these are going to go down through the axle housing and reach into the differential spool. So with that step completed, now we've got really what the axle is going to look like. This is pretty much it. All I need to do is install the rear link mounts and then install the wheel hexes. Those are both right down here. These are plastic and the wheel hexes are actually made of metal. So let's go ahead and get those installed. So now we've got the full rear axle built. Everything looks great. It all runs smoothly. I love it. But why stop here when we can just build the front axle next? So why don't we go ahead and do that? So I've got all the parts laid out here and we're going to start working on the front axle. Right here is where I was talking about that they say to build the second spool later on in the assembly, but we've already got it built here, so we kind of beat the system there. One thing that I want to show you guys before I start building this second axle though is unfortunately last night when I was working on the rear axle, I did not pick up the camera to record this, even though I now wish that I did. But it's okay because we're going to do it again with this one right here. I went and I painted with gold the red differential cover, and that looks pretty cool. I need to do a little bit more touch up. I need to do a little bit of a second layer here. But I'm going to show you guys how I did it when we get to it over here on this red diff cover. But that looks pretty cool. And I also did silver metallic on my transfer case and my transmission to make it look a little bit more realistic. So those are some cool little details that I did. I've got all the parts laid out here, the screws, everything. So all of the parts are laid out. Let's do it. So I've got the caster blocks on now. They're all screwed in, 6 screws in total. You guys saw how I did the painting of the diff cover. All I'm using is a fine point metallic marker. It is a permanent marker, and I have tried. It doesn't really rub off. It's a very cool look that we've got now. I just want to show you how this front axle is built on camera. I remember when I built the original chassis kit that this was probably one of my favorite things to build, was the front axle drive shafts and actually the CV pins that are going across in the portal axle. Right here what we've got is the CV cross pin. This is a cylinder that has a hole through the center of it for another pin to go through and make kind of a U-joint style. So that goes through the axle right here, and you can see there's a small hole that is left there. Then we bring in the portal input gear. That's going to go over the axle, and then we bring in a 2 by 12 millimeter cross pin that's going to go into the CV cross pin. And then once it goes in, now you've got your connection, so that way you can actually have the wheels pivot with steering. Then it all gets covered up by a bearing right there, and then those pins are locked into place. Now we bring in the portal cover, and when this goes in here, you can see that there are 3 small screw holes, and then we're going to actually put 3 button head screws that are going to clamp down this bearing, and that keeps it in place. I love this design. It was the first time I ever saw something like this when I built the original chassis kit, and it's just one of my favorite things that have kind of stuck with me from that first build, and getting to build it again is just really fun. So let's advance and keep going. So to install the portal assemblies to the caster blocks, all it is a small metal bushing going into the caster block, and then we put in a button head screw to secure it in. And boom, just like that, we've got 2 brand new beautiful axles. I love this gold accent. Tell me what you guys think about that. Hopefully you guys enjoy it just as much as I do, because I think it looks pretty sweet. So that's going to wrap it up for this one. I hope you all enjoyed it. Until next time, guys.